Yo guys, good morning, welcome to the video. This is going to be a video going over some of the highlights of the patch notes. As you can see here, it is incredibly long. I'm not going to go over it all. I tried going over it all and I ended up recording a video for over an hour and a half and didn't even get through most of it. So we're going to go over the highlights. It's going to be a lot of rambling, a lot of words, so stick me on the other monitor, keep gaming away, and I'll tell you all about the big things from this patch. Now, I'm not going to go over every single thing from the patch notes or the reveal, as you should go and watch that if you want an update on what's changing. But for the purposes of understanding this video, I will go over a couple of things. First of all, the new legendary aptitude system on the legendaries means that they have essentially dumbed down legendaries to their most effective nodes, the most build enabling nodes, and removed kind of the clutter, the life, the resistance, the attack speed, the physical damage, all that kind of stuff. And they've kept the important modifiers, the build enabling ones. And what that's been replaced with is the ability to craft on legendaries. So each legendary will come with either 0 to 4 legendary aptitude, and this determines the number of crafted modifiers you can get on that legendary. So when I say legendary aptitude, or I will undoubtedly at some point say LP accidentally because it's very reminiscent of last epoch system, that is what I'm referring to. So first of all, we've got the new hero. Go check out the reveal if you want to see how he works. Then we have the first big addition that we're going to talk about is the new prototype relics and memories. So prototype memories and relics, if you weren't present last season, they added a new way to get build enabling memories and relics earlier on. You don't get the full effect. Well, you do get the full effect, but you get a reduced amount of damage dealt by your character by using these. But these effects are so strong that it kind of makes up for it, right? So the biggest one I'll point out here is the Iris one, which allows you to use Frost Iris much earlier. You did really need this memory, and it costs thousands of FEs unless you were one of the first people to grab it. So very, very big change for Irises. I think you're the biggest benefactor of this addition for sure. Cat Eye Erica, also very nice, but Cat Eye Erica did get a lot of nerfs, so we'll see about that one. Rosa as well, it's very nice, but these weren't particularly hard to get your hands on anyway. They were pretty cheap. But yeah, very, very nice change. Very cool to see them sticking with the prototype idea. It's very nice to be able to get these memories and relics early on and get your character up and running. The next thing is the spell burst activation. This is a very, very, very strong activation medium and one that I suspect will be used in a lot of endgame builds. Spell burst was something that you couldn't really trigger before. They removed that option for spell burst, but they've added it back with this activation medium. Now you can go back to those kind of cast when channeling icy ring setups, or maybe you want to go split firebolt, lethal flash, that kind of stuff. This is going to do it for you. And also it's got the benefit of not suffering from being a human. As you reach full spell burst, it will immediately cast. It will perfectly cast your spells when you reach the max amount of spell burst. So you will only be casting the strongest versions of your spells every single time. Which is a massive, massive buff for spell burst builds. So I suspect we'll see a lot of those in the end game. Early on, obviously, we're not going to see it because it's going to be hard to get your hands on. This requires people to run Mistville at a reasonably high month to grab these. But yeah, this is going to be something you're going to want if you want to play those cast when channeling builds. Definitely back on the menu. Shackles of Malice is a new skill. It kind of works like Bane or Hex Blast. I can't remember which. But essentially, when you hit an enemy, for each curse on the enemy, it's going to deal additional damage, 40% additional damage for each. This stacks, and it does deal a small amount of erosion damage by a baseline as well. Pretty like middling amount of flat damage, but then you obviously get this massive 40% bonus. So probably a very strong skill. Hit-based erosion isn't something that's really done. Corrosive Throw was an example on Ranger of Glory. We haven't really seen that many hit-based erosion builds, so maybe this will bring it into the fray. It looks good on paper, but I'm not particularly sure how you would want to build it initially. Then we'll go down. We did get a big nerf to Explosion. The radius has been reduced from 6 to 3 meters. I don't think this is going to affect too many things, as most of the time when you're relying on explodes, you have some ability to stack the mobs anyway, whether you're playing Rosa or you have knockback with something like Train. You can only drag the mobs onto the big ones anyway. It's just going to be a bit more annoying. I don't think this is going to be that big of a deal. The dummy has been raised from 500 billion to 1 trillion. So for all you mathematicians out there who like to cap the dummy and like to measure your build's success based on that value, yeah, you have a new math equation to complete. A very new one, actually, with all the changes. The end game, a lot of adjustments to the end game based on the Void Chart edition. You should go check that out in the reveal if you haven't seen that. Then we have, moving down, we have a few changes to some major talents. The biggest ones, I would say, was the removal of the deck stacking attack and cast speed mod on Perceptive. You now get 20% cooldown instead, which is nice for some builds, but pretty mediocre end game, I would imagine. It's just this scaling is hard to beat. But they had to do this based on the changes to stats. If you don't know, stats now synergize with your skill. So each skill has a scaling, whether it's strength, dex, int, or a combination of the three. And for each 1 point of the corresponding stat, your skill will gain 0.5% additional damage. So stat stacking is going to be pretty good. And each build is definitely going to want to have a kind of baseline amount of main stat because it's just going to be weighted so heavily. The comparison between upgrading, between deciding between potential upgrades for a build is how much additional damage does this give me total, and main stat, at least before getting a certain amount, is going to be very highly weighted amongst those decisions. So expect to try and get some strength dex or in early on for some big damage upgrades. Then we have focus is now global damage instead of just damage for the additional for the channeling skill. So this is good for cast when channeling builds or cast on crit builds, I guess. You now gain damage for the skill that you'll be triggering instead of just the channeled skill, which is very nice. Penetrating, you can now apply ailments. So you were able to do this in the past, but they nerfed it because of, I believe, because of Ignite Gemma 1. But now you can apply ailments with this again. So potentially some good news for Gemma 1 players. You're going to be able to do some big ignites and get a massive amount of penetration again. So we might be seeing some more Gemma 1. She did get some buffs later on that we'll look at. Hair Trigger, they removed the reduced cooldown, but also removed some of the additional damage. Instead of 75%, it's now 50%. But you don't have to suffer this minus 15% cooldown recovery speed. So for specifically for things like Train, I'd say this is overall a buff because cooldown obviously affects the number of times your burst is going to trigger, and you already, it definitely compensates for the lack of damage it's going to give you now. They've limited the increase and decrease to knockback distance applies to attack or spell damage to 1 on the Divinity Slates. This has been a long time coming. Surprised it took them this long, but with the addition of the new hero having built-in knockback scaling, seems like the right time to do it for sure. Indifference now doesn't reduce your attack and cast speed, it instead just reduces your damage by 10%. This initially seems like, you know, kind of whatever, a nerf, but in some situations it's actually a buff because your ability to reach breakpoints in terms of attack speed in order to trigger specific things is going to be easier, right? You're not going to be getting that penalty to your attack and cast speed. So for a lot of trigger-based builds, this is actually a pretty decent buff. Reflection now gives you 30% additional aura effect instead of 20, which is a massive buff. Reflection was already very, very good if you could stomach the additional 20% sealed mana cost. This is always very good in endgame when people have min-max slates with sealed mana and stuff, so expect to see Reflection pedigrees going for an awful lot. Bing got slight buffs. I don't think it's enough. I think they just need to let Bing spell burst fully instead of reducing it to a half now instead of a third. I'm not a Bing main. He's obviously still got some decent builds with the Einhoyar build, but personally I would like to see them just let him spell burst. I don't see any reason why not. Windstalker, slight buffs to her damage. Erica 2 got big nerfs. They basically nerfed every single part, but you are going to be able to trigger Feline Figure more often, but it's going to be less effective. It settles shock less times, and all these stacking buffs you can get to your damage are now reduced. There is one little thing at the bottom, which maybe someone can just clarify to me. When Feline Figure applies shock to enemies, it does not refresh its own shock status. Now, whether or not this means it simply doesn't overwrite shocks, or it doesn't remove bigger shocks with smaller ones, I don't know which one it means. If it means you don't remove big shocks with small ones, this is a buff. But I don't know if that's what it means. This is kind of hard. I don't know. Maybe I'm just an idiot. I don't really understand that though. Predicted Hope on Oracle Thea. This is the snapshotting modifier, which makes it so for every focus blessing you spend, you gain 20% additional damage on your next core skill. They nerfed it from a massive, I think it was like 1,000 before, right? They nerfed it to 300. Now it's back up to 500, so a nice buff there if you want to play something like Thundercloud Thea. And then Incarnation of the Gods got two very big changes, actually. So they reduced the damage that you get for stacking Agility Blessings by quite a considerable amount. 2% doesn't seem like a lot, but remember this stacks up to 20 times. So you go from, what, 12 times 20 to 40 to 200. So you lose 40% there, but obviously that was not multiplicative with itself. Now you get an extra 60% additional damage baseline, and also potentially 75% additional damage as well. So Thea 2 got a pretty decent buff. I could see it being used. Order Calling got minimal buffs. I think he needs a lot more. The problem with Order Calling is he's fine early on, but he struggles to get to those big numbers later on. So if you're starting out as an Order Calling, you just want to use him to get going, I think you can have a fine time. But later on, I think he just struggles to get the numbers. And I don't think this is going to be enough to get him there. Charge Calling got one important node here that says self-destructing synthetic minions are not counted towards the minion count. This was removed, so now they do count towards the minion count, and I don't know how impactful this is, but given the nature of these buffs, basically he's been given attribute scaling, you get way more damage effectiveness, you got a massive 3x multiplier to the amount of flat damage you're going to get from your minion's life and energy shield. This makes me believe that this node is quite devastating. Otherwise, why are they buffing him so much? Because these buffs are very, very big. They've also doubled the effectiveness of Overload on him. So this screams either super OP or maybe bad. But I personally do not know how impactful this line is here. Maybe you guys can let me know. You are able to scale the speed of your minion's charge with attack speed. So maybe you just need to get more attack speed now. And this line is essentially not going to matter all that much. So potentially very good things for charge calling. I'm just not well versed enough in minions to tell you. Now, Gemma 1 got a bit of just a mix around of her stuff. One big thing is if you want to play a lightning-based Gemma 1 build now, you can. You just simply need to deal fire or cold damage. So a little bit of fire and cold, and you're going to gain fusion energy. Before, you had to kind of work in a trigger of a fire or cold skill, whether it was a curse or whatever, in order to proc your fusion energy generation. Now you don't need to do that, and instead of getting the additional damage baseline from fusion energy, which was unscalable with fusion effect, that's now going to be increased damage, a much higher magnitude, and you're going to get it back down here. You're going to get that fusion energy gains an additional effect, and instead of 1% fire and cold, it's going to be 3. And of course, this is scalable with fusion energy effect. So all these kind of nerfs that were on her previous traits are compensated for very heavily by this Glacial Flames buff, which is scalable. So Gemma 1, I'm not sure how this ends up looking late game, but it seems like if you're doing some fusion energy stuff and you have a lot of fusion energy, you're also maybe scaling your own power skill effect and transferring that to your fusion energy effect, you could be getting in the realms of 250, 300% additional damage just from this node right here, if done correctly. So yeah, looking good for Gemma 1. I like the look of this. Gemma Frostbitten got a bit of another mix. They nerfed one but buffed another to try and compensate. It was a pretty big nerf to Blizzard Incarnation. Instead of enemies taking 30% increased cold damage from you, they only take 20%. But you do deal an additional 8% instead of 6 for each point of cold energy. Now, importantly for Frostbitten Gemma 2, the magnitude of the additional damage dealt to frozen enemies modifier on weapons has been significantly reduced. It was a very, very high amount of damage. So Frostbitten got kind of a double whammy. I still think she'll be good. She's one of the best hero traits in the game. But yeah, she definitely got a bit of a nerf from these. Now, one of the biggest benefactors of these changes is definitely Flame of Pleasure. Pretty much every aspect of this character got buffed. I expect to see a lot of Flame of Pleasures, whether it's Firebird or some kind of dot scaling, conversion builds. Yeah, this will be very good. Essentially, everything got buffed numerically, and you also got this new effect that every 20 levels you reduce the trigger interval of death by fire by 0.15 seconds. Everything else just got buffed by a lot. You can see it right here. So 50 goes to 100, 40 goes to 50, 30 goes to 50, 40 goes to 50. and 40 goes to 50. So just a lot more damage on this character, which is good because this character was something that was it was passable early on. But as you went into the later stages of the season and other characters were doing trillions of damage, this character was just about capping the dummy. So good changes to Flame of Pleasure. She was kind of weak and kind of one-dimensional as well. You can only really do one thing on her. Maybe you can still only do one thing on her, but I do like these changes. They look very good. Rog, I'm not going to talk about Rog. Rog sucks. It just is what it is. They buff Rog every single season and he still sucks. Maybe there's 1 or 2 builds that work on him. People still find a way to make him work, but one good build does not a good character make, in my opinion, and they need to really rethink this hero. Elap's got a big buff, actually. They changed his base scaling from 20% additional damage over time and 10% additional damage over time during Twisted Spacetime. It is now 30% additional damage and damage over time during Twisted Spacetime. So a nice buff to Spacetime. Elapse, Mind Control Yoga, going to be a great league starter. What you're going to go after that, if it doesn't quite reach those high numbers, I'm not so sure. But there are some very good legendaries that are going to work very well on Spacetime Elapse. Then we have Berserker Rayhan, my boy. This is what I'm going to be playing. Burst. Now, so one of the big problems with Burst and Train in general was you didn't have very many vectors to scale it. Now you get the additional main attribute scaling. So you get Strength and Dex, which is going to give you additional damage to Burst. Very nice to start with. But then you also get a new line on Rage, which says for each 1 level, you get additional 2% burst damage instead of 1, which is a massive buff. And we get this new scaling vector for this character. Burst is affected by skill level. For every +1 skill level, additional 12% damage, multiplicative. So I'm going to be playing Train. Obviously, Train's big problem was that it didn't do any damage, or like in the end game. So take this with a pinch of salt. Obviously, like what is probably looking like 5, 6, or even 7 times damage is great, right? But when you were doing 1/10 of the dummy, yeah, 6 or 7 times doesn't get you there. But I am very confident that we're going to be able to pop off on Train this season, and I will definitely be playing it. Rosa. God, it's a lot of words for Rosa. I think I might have to tap out on this one because I'm really not too sure on Rosa. Essentially now when you use your hero trait, you're going to deal damage to yourself. I think this is in some small part to try and stop you using Burial Snicker. I still think you're probably going to use Burial Snicker because it's just so good. Yeah, I think honestly it's... If I had to guess, she's going to feel pretty much exactly the same. But that's a lot of words, and I don't really understand Rosa that well. We'll have to talk to Palsteron. The drop level for hero-specific legendary hero relics and memories has been increased to level 80, so you're going to get these much later into your progression, especially if you want to dip into Black Sail as one of your initial void charts. You're going to want to wait till around level 80, or drop level 80, I should say, which is time mark 6/7. And the same for activation trait point legendary hero memories. Then we have some adjustments to the legendary memories and relics. Not really going to go over many of these. Skill updates. There's a few decent ones. We got a bit of a buff to Berserking Blade. Big buff to Ring of Blades. The amount of skill range has gone up to 40% per proj quant, so you're going to be much easier able to get that overlap in the center with Ring of Blades, and it does more damage. And as I said, I suspect this to be very good on the new hero. Icy Ring got a weird one. The cast speed has been increased to 1.25, so you're going to be doing more Icy Rings, but it deals less damage. This kind of nerfs the triggering of Icy Ring. It's kind of better for self-cast. I don't know if this is a good decision, since this game kind of trends towards automating skills. I don't know if this is a change that I like. It kind of just kills Icy Ring, if I'm honest. But we shall see. Blazing Bullet got a bit of a nerf. It was a decent skill. A lot of people used it on Lethal Flash with the Bow of Endless Dusk, and it did very good numbers early on with the shotgun in. But that was more because of Desperate Measures than this skill. I think this skill is still fine. It's one of the probably smoothest skills, in my opinion, to play. Don't really know why it needed a nerf. Whirlwind Blades. This is a fantastic skill. People play on Lethal Flash. It's a very strong build. And now it lasts a bit longer. So I assume this is more for single target, where you're just going to put it down and let the mob stand in it. Hopefully 5 seconds is enough for that mob to die. Minimum interval for the projectile to deal damage to the same enemy lowered from 0.5 to 0.25 on Ring of Blades, so another buff to Ring of Blades. And then Path of Flames, you no longer get that annoying little jolt forward at the end of channeling. You also get a bit more width on the path itself, which is nice. Just you had to literally pixel perfect run over things before. And now you gain, for every one channel stack, the skill gains additional duration. So for any Reap Purification builds, this is a big buff if you're scaling the damage based on your Path of Flame. But the actual base duration did get reduced. So I think you're still going to be fine, right? Unless this is not multiplicative with itself, it still ends up being more regardless. You go from 3 to what, like 6.6? Yeah, you're going to be chilling. And then anything else extraordinary? Thunderspike got a buff, so if you liked that Erika 2 build, there you could definitely get a big buff from that. It's like 50% more damage. But obviously Erika 2 did get a pretty substantial nerf. A lot of Demolisher changes, and I suspect this is because of some of the Demolisher legendaries. Shadow Swamp did get big nerf. Terror buff maximum layers provided when moving reduced from 3 to 1. Each layer does provide more additional damage, but every 1 terror quantity increases the maximum layers of terror buff provided while moving by 1 comes 2. So some buffs, but they also fixed the bug with this skill that was kind of the main reason it was going so crazy. So I suspect Shadow Swamp might be dead in the water, but we shall see. I'm sure someone's going to try it. Haunting A-Bomb is a very good skill. It's a lot of people use it on Rosa. In the past, people have used it on Frostbit and Gemma because it has such a high additional damage multiplier on it. You can, if you get any amount of flat damage from any other source, whether it's mana stacking or Varial Snicker on Rosa, you end up getting a massive multiplier, and then you combine that with something like an activation medium that gives you another 600% multiplier. You end up scaling any high source of flat damage from anything to an absurd amount. So Haunting A-Bomb is very, very good. So to see that get buffed, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see some Haunting A-Bomb builds this league. They did nerf a lot of the cooldown on activation skills. Pretty much all of them got longer cooldowns. Every single one, pretty much throughout the board. And then we're going to go down to the legendaries. First of all, a lot of legendaries did get removed. The full list is here. Notable removals would be the Firelord's Blade. If you were someone that liked the really cheap Frost Erika build that used this with the helmet and the shield, well, you can't do that anymore. Was it Fire? It might have been Firelord's Sin. Sorry, it might have been that one. Yeah, no more doing that. So nerf the Frost Iris at least early on. Dark Chasers were very nice. They got removed. Machine Lord, another nice one that got removed. A lot of just, I guess, clutter. I guess things they couldn't really figure out how to reduce to 1 or 2 affixes. They've just said, nah, we're getting rid of them. And fair play, you know. They've made a massive change to legendaries. I kind of understand it. Now we have some changes to the Netherrealm gameplay. So God of War got a nerf. The amount of projectiles has been reduced. The amount of skill area has been reduced. You're still going to go God of War. I am still going to go God of War. It's still like the move speed, the AoE, the projectiles, even if they're diminished, are still so strong. And you pretty much always get a decent like little explosion of loot at the end, especially with the new legendaries being much more common, right? So things like Crimson or Ghost Slaughter, if you're a builder that wants to use those, you're going to realistically get them from God of War now pretty frequently. So I think God of War is still absolutely fine. Dark Surge, you're much more likely to get legendary equipment reward types, which is nice. Obviously, fuel is the thing that you wanted in the end game in Deep Space, but maybe this is switch things up now, and you're going to want more of that priceless legendary equipment with +3 legendary aptitude at least. So Dark Surge is going to be probably one of the main sources of acquiring a large amount of legendaries. Cube, they've removed legendaries from Cube in general and replaced it with slates. Also, they've completely reworked how you even get slates, so I suspect Cube to be very important early on in order to get slates and get the equipment you need to roll slates, as they do require a lot of the materials. So Cube and God of War are going to be 2 things that I definitely lean towards early on. Eterna, you've got much higher probability of Soul Candle rewards. and reduce the probability of commodity and memory card reward points appearing. The kind of, I guess for most gameplays, what they're trying to do is to focus that gameplay on the thing it specifically grants. So Eterna, if you want to get candles, you go to Eterna. If you want legendaries, do Dark Surge. I think they're trending towards that. Nightmare gameplay, Dream Travelers in Netherrealm will no longer drop items. It's kind of whatever. Monsters summoned by Dream Mist and Invading Lost Dream will still drop items normally. I mean, Dream was incredibly powerful, just not only because of the actual nightmares that you would run, but because the mobs dropped a lot of loot. Now they won't, so you'll be relying exclusively on like these Dream Mists, which still do explode with a lot of FEs and stuff. But this is a big nerf to Dream. Again, I'll probably still be doing Dream early on, because you want to level up the Dream Lotus to max, because that's when Dream really starts to kick off, right? So I imagine Dream will be something I'm definitely doing early on. Dream, Cube, God of War are the three that I'll definitely be doing in my early Void shots. Whispering Mist, they've made a lot of changes to Whispering Mist in general. A lot of the food and stuff they've made better. You no longer have to click the portal in order to summon the resident to get the resident's eye. All of the resident eyes that you drop will be resident eyes. You won't drop the juice anymore. You'll drop the tradable fragment if you run into a misfill resident. You also have to spend less deduction records in order to upgrade your talent tree. Again, something you're going to want to do if you ever plan on doing misfill is leveling up that tree as soon as possible, so you're getting the max amount of value from it. Yeah, I suspect a lot of people will be like exclusively playing Mistville. So it's going to be hard to compete with those. It's kind of like with City, right? It's hard to compete with the people that have their maxed out City tree. They're farming tons of candles. They know all the candles to combine. They have it perfectly set up. Maybe similar things going to happen with Mistville, but there is a bit less min-maxing to go on with Mistville than City. So if you're someone that just wants to hop in and do Mistville, I think you'll be okay. But you are at least going to want to get that deduction record filled out to guarantee those, or as close to guarantee those wins as possible. Now, another thing is that on the 9th day, you are now guaranteed to get an activation medium. So 9th and 15th are guaranteed. And on the 11th and 13th, it's a 50% chance. So on average, you're going to be getting 3 activation mediums per Mistville, which is a huge, huge change, assuming you're winning, of course. And then they've moved around where you get some of them. Then we have the changes to Divinity Slates. Again, check the reveal for these. It's too much to go over in this. We're already, 30 minutes in. Let's keep going. In terms of crafting legendary, so I'll give a quick rundown of how I think this is going to go. It's very expensive to craft legendary gear, and what I mean by that is the plasticity used to upgrade an affix on a legendary piece of gear is extremely high, and it costs 10 affixes to re-roll the mods. So you're going to go through a lot of legendary bases in order to get the affix that you want. Now, you can, of course, targeted process mods on, but getting those initial mods is going to be very, very difficult. What you can do, though, because of the new transferring system that they've added, is you can get one legendary that you like. It might not be rolled perfectly, it's not corroded, but you get good mods on it. Brilliant. Then you can buy bases until you double corrode it or single corrode it the way you want it, and you can transfer the crafted affixes from the previous onto the new corroded base, and you've got a much better item there. So you're never going to have this situation where you have to keep crafting on the affixes. You only have to do that once, and then you could work on getting the perfect legendary base, and you combine them together. So yes, it's going to be expensive. It's going to be difficult. You're not just going to go in there and have like a +2 focus blessing, elemental destruction curse, +60 in chaotic ending with triple crit damage per focus blessing. It's not going to happen because it's going to be too difficult to get those correct mods initially. But eventually, it is possible, right? Eventually, if you combine the bases and you keep trying, you're going to get it. That's another reason why when you drop legendaries, you're probably going to want to check out what mod they actually have. If you drop a legendary that is used by people, ID it and have a look at what affix it's got, because if it's got a really good one, like if you drop a pair of gloves, a legendary gloves with fervor, that's going to be bank, because that's almost impossible to get by rolling for it. It's like a 1 in over 160, I believe. to hit, and you only get 20 rolls, and that's without upgrading anything. So yeah, it's not going to be super easy by any means, is what I'm trying to get at, but possible. Next, we have a few changes to like the systems, kind of whatever. We'll go down. We're on the legendaries. Now, there are a few legendaries that can't have legendary aptitude, exquisite box, eternity, antinomy, and imperial might. I mean, these are like the 4 uber uniques of the game. Yeah, you're not going to be getting legendary aptitude on these. They're good enough already, is I imagine how it's supposed to be. And then in terms of like standout, there are so many standouts. We could be here all day going over these. A big one here, Farewell Desire. This used to be a corrosion modifier that multi-strikes deal increasing multi-strike damage. It is now a baseline mod on the item. And of course, this is a much more common item, at least with 2 or fewer legendary aptitude. So if you're someone that wants to use a Farewell Desire, this is going to be a very strong baseline to start with. We have things like Burial Snicker. It's +2, going up to 6 now, and Corroded, this goes up to like +10. Again, for Rosas, if you can get away with it, very, very good. Demolisher charge, restoration speed on Steel Stag is set to 400%, and your main skill is supported by Devastator. This is a big change from what it used to be, and a massive change to this item that is you don't really see here, is this corrosion becomes... it changes the mod, so it no longer fixes your restoration speed. It instead increases your restoration speed by up to 300%. So Steel Stagnation is crazy with the corrosion. So I expect to see a lot of Steel Stag builds. Very cool. Elemental Whirl is just a phenomenal item. We'll definitely be seeing that. What else we got? Memory gives the base wilt damage and the explosion. Memory's fallen out of favor, but maybe with the ability to craft on it exactly what you want, whether it's plus skill levels or even more base wilt damage, we could see Memory make a bit of a comeback. What else we got? Bow of Endless Dust got a bit of a buff. It's up to 180% now. And bear in mind that a lot of these, because of the way that the transfer system works, you're going to be able to corrode these to get the mods you want. Remember, these items have 2 mods now. So if you even single corrode them, that's a 50-50 chance to upgrade the mod you want. And if you double corrode them, it's guaranteed to upgrade both the mods you want. So you're definitely going to get corroded legendaries with the affixes you want. Whereas before, obviously, it was like a 1 in 5. Now it's guaranteed. So expect to see some crazy corrosions, and they will be an expected part of your build, I imagine. Like, you will be expected, at least on the top end, to corrode your legendaries to have these perfect base modifiers. So definitely something to think about as you level up and maybe want to purchase some, Dark Surge currency. Jumble Ice got a big change, additional 12% spell damage, and it's minus 20% spell damage 2 seconds after gaining a focus burst. So minus increased, but you get additional instead, and you also get that flat spell crit, and then you can also craft it with plus levels, additional damage to Frozen, all that kind of stuff. All those crazy mods you can get on ones, you can now get on a Jumble Ice. So Jumble Ice, very, very strong. We could go over this all day. We're definitely not going to. Were there any other big standouts that I can think of? Ominous Guillotine was... Did they get rid of it? I hope not. I definitely saw it. Yeah, here it is. With at least 10 stacks of Tenacity Blessing, you get 30% weapon attack speed. You also get the Sacrifice Keystone passive, and you get 3 additional stacks of Tenacity Blessing. So Ominous Guillotine is fantastic. With it being an axe as well, and on axes you can get plus 4 levels to melee skills, then you get a lot of physical damage. Could definitely be something I'm looking at going with Train. Then we have Resolution Steps that give, for each layer of Tenacity Blessing, 4% Ellie Res. This corrodes to up to 6%. So if you have 10 Tenacity Blessings, you're going to get your resistance capped just with this pair of boots alone. Then the only thing you have to worry about is erosion resistance. Again, something I'm definitely looking at doing for Train if I can get my hands on a decent legendary aptitude, Ominous Guillotine early on. But yeah, that's we could maybe go over these in another video, but this video has now been 35 minutes long. There are tons of legendaries and cool combinations and corrosions, and this season is looking incredible. I hope you guys are excited. This was a very wordy video, a lot of rambling away. we'll end it with this item right here. Just bear in mind with the truth necklace that you get +3 levels, but also 65 main stat is now 32% additional damage for any corresponding skill. And if you have a skill that scales with all 3, that's a lot of additional damage. Truth is very strong, and it can have 4 legendary aptitude. This game's about to get crazy, and I'll see you there on the 4th of July. Peace.